High in the canopy of a Central American rainforest hangs an animal moving so slowly that you could watch it for a full minute and swear it had not moved at all. Look closer, and you notice something stranger still. Its fur is green, not painted green, not lit green, but genuinely living green, because a whole garden of algae is growing across its coat, and tiny moths are crawling through that garden as if it were a miniature jungle of its own. This animal is so slow, so patient, so utterly unhurried that an entire ecosystem has had time to move in and set up home on its living body. Its name, in almost every language, is an insult. We call it lazy. But that name is wrong, because this creature is not failing to keep up with the world. It has quietly outthought it. Its slowness is not a weakness. It is one of the most brilliant survival strategies on the planet. A superpower disguised as laziness. This is the story of the sloth, and by the end you will never see slowness the same way again. To understand why a sloth moves the way it does, you have to start not with its muscles, but with its dinner. Because everything about this animal flows from one radical decision made deep in its evolutionary past. It chose to live almost entirely on leaves. That may sound harmless. Leaves are everywhere in a rainforest, endless and free for the taking. But leaves are, in truth, one of the worst meals in the entire forest. They are low in calories, poor in nutrients, tough to break down, and worse, many of them are laced with toxins, chemical defenses the trees evolved specifically to stop animals from eating them. Most creatures cannot survive on leaves alone. There simply isn't enough energy in them. A monkey races through the canopy grabbing fruit and insects, food packed with sugar and protein. The sloth turned its back on all of that. It looked at the one food source almost nobody else wanted, the low-energy, mildly poisonous leaves, and it built its entire body around making that work. And once you commit to a diet that gives you almost no energy, one law of nature takes over completely. You cannot afford to spend energy you do not have. Every fast movement, every burst of speed, every quick escape costs fuel, and a leaf eater running on empty simply cannot pay that bill. So the sloth did the only thing it could. It slowed everything down. This is where the real magic begins, inside the body, where you cannot see it. The sloth has one of the slowest metabolisms of any mammal on Earth. Its whole internal engine has been dialed down to burn as little fuel as possible. Its heart rate is low, its muscle mass is unusually small for its size, and it moves through life at a fraction of the pace of almost any other animal. A sloth in the wild spends most of its day either sleeping or sitting completely still, conserving every precious drop of energy for when it truly needs it. Think of it like a phone permanently locked in the deepest power-saving mode. The screen is dim, the background apps are off, everything unnecessary is switched down, and because of that, one tiny charge lasts an extraordinarily long time. The sloth runs its entire life on power-saving mode. It has to because its food gives it barely enough to keep going. And that low-energy engine explains one of the strangest facts about the whole animal. Its digestion is almost unbelievably slow, the slowest of any mammal we know of. When a sloth eats a leaf, that leaf does not simply pass through in a few hours the way your lunch does. It can take weeks to turn a single meal into usable energy. The sloth has a large, complex, multi-chambered stomach, a bit like a cow's, filled with special bacteria whose entire job is to slowly ferment those tough, toxic leaves and break down the poisons that would otherwise harm the animal. That process cannot be rushed. It takes time, enormous amounts of time, and a sloth's stomach can be so full of slowly fermenting leaves that the meals it is still digesting make up a huge share of its body weight. It is carrying its own slow-motion food factory everywhere it goes. And here is the beautiful logic of it all. A slow metabolism needs slow digestion, and slow digestion produces just enough energy for a slow body, and a slow body needs only a small amount of that poor, leafy food. Every piece fits. The sloth is not badly designed. It is exquisitely, perfectly tuned, a masterpiece of doing more with almost nothing. But the slowness runs even deeper than digestion because the sloth breaks one of the oldest rules of being a mammal. You and I are warm-blooded. We burn fuel constantly to hold our body at a steady temperature day and night, whether it is hot or cold outside. It keeps us ready to move at any moment, but it is enormously expensive. It costs a great deal of energy, and energy is the one thing a sloth simply does not have to spare. So the sloth cheats. Unlike almost every other mammal, a sloth lets its body temperature drift up and down with the world around it. On a cool, cloudy morning, its temperature drops and the sloth becomes sluggish and slow, sometimes so slow that the bacteria in its stomach struggle to work and it can barely digest at all. On a warm afternoon, it climbs to the top of the canopy, spreads out, and basks in the sun to warm up, exactly the way a lizard or a snake would. This is a reptile's trick, borrowed by a mammal, and it saves a staggering amount of energy. Instead of paying every hour to run its own internal furnace, the sloth simply lets the sun do the work for free. And now we arrive at the part that turns this whole story on its head, because everything we have described so far, the slow engine, the endless digestion, the cold body, might sound like a recipe for disaster. Slow, weak, easily caught in a rainforest full of predators. Surely being that sluggish is a death sentence. It is the exact opposite. The sloth's slowness is its single greatest defense. Consider the animals that hunt it. Above the canopy soars the harpy eagle, one of the most powerful birds of prey on the planet, with talons the size of a grizzly bear's claws, an eagle strong enough to pluck a monkey clean out of a tree. Below, the jaguar prowls, and the elusive ocelot climbs. These are formidable hunters, but they nearly all share one crucial weakness. They hunt by detecting movement, a flick, a rustle, a dash across a branch that is what triggers a predator's strike. Their eyes and instincts are exquisitely tuned to catch the flash of prey trying to flee, and the sloth gives them nothing. By moving so slowly that it barely seems to move at all, the sloth becomes almost invisible to the very predators built to catch it. A harpy eagle scanning the canopy for the twitch of a monkey passes straight over a motionless sloth, its eyes simply failing to lock onto something so still. The sloth is not hiding behind a leaf. It is hiding in plain sight, hiding inside its own stillness. And this is where that living green garden finally makes perfect sense. Remember the algae growing in its fur. The sloth's coat is not like ordinary fur. It is coarse and grooved, and it holds rainwater like a sponge, and in that warm, damp jungle air, algae take root and flourish across the animal's entire body. That algae tints the sloth a mottled greenish color, and up in a canopy of green leaves, a green animal is a hidden animal. The sloth wears living camouflage, grown fresh on its own back, a green cloak that helps it melt into the treetops. And it goes further still because that algae garden is a whole tiny ecosystem. Living in the fur are sloth moths, insects that spend their entire lives on the animal. When the sloth makes its rare trip to the ground, some of these moths lay their eggs in its droppings. The moths help fertilize the algae. The algae grows richer in the fur, and there is even evidence that the sloth may lick some of that nutritious algae, taking a little extra nourishment from the garden growing on its own body. The slowest animal in the forest is so slow, so still, so patient that it has become a walking habitat, a home and a food source for creatures that live nowhere else on Earth. Nothing about that is lazy. It is one of the most extraordinary partnerships in nature. Now look at how the sloth is built to hold this life together. Because hanging upside down for almost your entire existence is not as simple as it sounds. The sloth's arms are longer than its legs, and each limb ends in long, curved claws, 3 on each foot for the 3-toed sloth, 2 on the front feet for the 2-toed sloth. Those claws work like permanent hooks. The sloth does not really grip a branch the way you would grip a bar, straining to hold on. It hangs, letting its own body weight settle its claws around the branch, so that clinging on costs it almost no effort at all. A sloth can hang from a branch fast asleep and never fall. And astonishingly, they have been known to keep hanging in place even after death, still locked to the tree. And because it spends its whole life inverted, the sloth's insides are rearranged to match. In most animals, the weight of the stomach and intestines, especially when full of slowly fermenting leaves, would press down on the lungs and make breathing hard when hanging upside down. So the sloth evolved special anchors, tissues that fasten its stomach and liver and other organs to its lower ribs, holding everything in place so that a full belly never crushes the breath out of it. Even the sloth's fur grows the wrong way, parting along the belly and flowing from stomach toward the back, so that rain runs cleanly off an animal that spends its life upside down. Every detail of this creature is a solution to the same quiet, patient way of living. But there is one moment when the sloth's whole brilliant strategy briefly falls apart, and it is one of the most puzzling behaviors in all of nature. Roughly once a week, the sloth does something that seems to make no sense at all. It slowly, carefully climbs all the way down from the safety of the canopy to the forest floor, purely to go to the toilet. It digs a small hole, relieves itself, covers it over, and then begins the long, exhausting climb back up. On the ground, everything that keeps the sloth safe up in the trees is suddenly gone. It cannot climb away from danger. It cannot move quickly. It is exposed and clumsy and slow, and this brief trip to the ground is one of the most dangerous things a sloth ever does, the moment it is most likely to be caught and killed. Scientists still debate exactly why it takes such a deadly risk instead of simply going to the toilet from up in the trees, as many canopy animals do. One leading idea ties it back to that garden in its fur, to the moths and the algae and the strange loop of life the sloth carries with it. Whatever the full answer, that weekly descent is the single crack in an otherwise flawless suit of armor, the price the sloth pays for its extraordinary way of life. And just when you think you have this animal fully understood, slow, still, tuned for a lazy life in the trees, it reveals one last surprise. Put a sloth in water and it transforms. On land, a sloth is almost helpless, dragging itself along the ground with its long arms because its legs are too weak to properly walk. But sloths are remarkably strong and capable swimmers. Reaching a wide arm forward and pulling with a slow, powerful stroke, a sloth can move through water several times faster than it ever manages on land. It can even hold its breath for a very long time by slowing its already slow heart rate down even further, letting it stay submerged far longer than you would ever expect. In a rainforest that floods with the seasons, this hidden talent lets the sloth cross rivers and swim between flooded trees. A slow-motion animal that suddenly in the water becomes surprisingly quick. So the next time you hear the word sloth used as an insult, remember what it really means. This animal took the poorest food in the forest, the leaves nobody else wanted, and built an entire way of life around it. It slowed its heart, quieted its body, borrowed a reptile's trick to warm itself for free, and turned its own slowness into a cloak of invisibility against the deadliest hunters in the canopy. It grew a garden on its back and shared its body with creatures that live nowhere else. It rebuilt its own insides so it could hang from the trees in perfect comfort. It is not a failed, sluggish animal that never learned to hurry. It is a specialist of the highest order, a creature that looked at the frantic, energy-hungry race of the rainforest and quietly opted out, choosing instead to do less, spend less, and endure. In a world obsessed with moving faster, the sloth is living proof that sometimes the smartest, most powerful thing an animal can do is slow all the way down. So here is what we would love to know from you. Of everything the sloth does, which piece amazed you the most? The green garden growing in its fur, the digestion that takes weeks to finish a single leaf, or the fact that this slowest of animals is secretly a powerful swimmer? Tell us in the comments, and if this changed the way you see the sloth and the strange genius of slowness, stay with us, because the natural world is full of quiet, patient creatures whose secrets are far stranger than they first appear.